It is hereby recorded that on the 16th of October 1946 at approximately 1:10 in the morning, Joachim von Ribbentrop, former foreign minister of Nazi Germany, was executed by hanging following conviction for crimes against peace. His body was cremated and ashes disposed of in a river to prevent any form of memorial. The execution was officially declared as the end of the case. However, further investigation reveals that while the accused was punished, his immediate family remained untouched by law, wealth confiscation, or long-term accountability. Subject 1. Anneliese von Ribbentrop, wife. Investigation confirms that Anneliese von Ribbentrop, spouse of the executed war criminal, was detained briefly after the war but released without prosecution. Records show no denazification trial, no seizure of assets, and no criminal charges filed against her. Evidence suggests she played an active role in encouraging her husband's rise within Nazi political circles. Despite this, she avoided all legal consequences due to personal wealth inherited from her father, Otto Henkel, founder of a major champagne enterprise established prior to the Nazi era. Between 1953 and 1975, Anneliese published multiple books defending Nazi foreign policy and portraying her husband as innocent. She remained publicly defiant until her death in 1973, never legally questioned for her actions. Subject 2. Rudolf von Ribbentrop, son. Rudolf von Ribbentrop voluntarily joined the Waffen-SS in 1941 and served on the Eastern Front, receiving multiple military decorations. In 1945, Allied authorities detained him on suspicion of executing Canadian prisoners of war during interrogation. After 3 years in custody, the case was dropped due to lack of conclusive evidence. No trial was conducted. In 1952, a German court ordered that Rudolf be made a legal partner in the Henkel champagne business, granting him access to the family fortune. He later lived a quiet life and published a memoir in old age partially defending his father's legacy. He died in 2019 at the age of 98. Subject 3. Other children. Records regarding the remaining children are incomplete and inconsistent. Several disappeared entirely from public documentation. One child's survival beyond infancy remains disputed. No official investigations clarify the post-war identities or whereabouts. Property record. The family residence in Berlin was confiscated post-war and repurposed for public use. However, financial assets tied to pre-war inheritance remained intact and protected by law. Conclusion of FIR. This report concludes that while legal punishment was applied to the principal accused, systemic limitations allowed family members to retain wealth, status, and freedom. The case highlights gaps between symbolic justice and material accountability. Case continuation. After the gallows, the Ribbentrop family file. Status. Further findings and unresolved questions. Section 4. The disappearing heirs. Further inquiry into the remaining children of Joachim von Ribbentrop reveals a deliberate pattern of disappearance from public life. Subject. Bettina von Ribbentrop, born 1922. Post-1945 records show no interviews, no publications, and no public statements. She neither defended nor condemned her father. She effectively erased herself from history, using post-war anonymity as protection. Subject. Ursula von Ribbentrop, born 1932. She was 13 years old at the time of her father's execution. Available documents suggest she lived an entirely private civilian life. No political involvement. No recorded public identity. Subject. Adolf von Ribbentrop, born 1935. Despite carrying one of the most toxic surnames in post-war Germany, Adolf entered the art world and later married into respectable society. Records indicate successful social rehabilitation without public scrutiny. Subject. Berthold von Ribbentrop, born 1940. Conflicting evidence exists regarding his fate. Some sources list his death in infancy. Others reference photographs dated after 1941. No conclusive documentation confirms survival or death. His trail ends completely. Finding. At least 3 heirs successfully vanished into post-war Germany with no accountability and no historical record. Section 5. The name that could not be erased. Despite attempts at anonymity, the Ribbentrop name remained legally protected. No laws existed to permanently bar family members from inheritance or professional advancement solely due to lineage. The stigma was social, not legal. Courts consistently ruled in favor of blood rights over moral responsibility. Section 6. The Mansion File. Property. Former Ribbentrop family villa, Berlin-Dahlem. Following Allied confiscation, the property was transferred to public institutions. By 1947, it had been repurposed for civilian use and later became an educational facility. Observation. The structure was reclaimed. The wealth was not. Children now study in rooms where Nazi diplomacy was once negotiated. The building changed purpose. The money never changed hands. Section 7. Legal contradictions. Post-war justice focused on individuals, not ecosystems. Leaders were executed. Families retained wealth. Inherited capital remained protected. Influence survived without uniform punishment. This created a dual reality. Public justice was visible. Private continuity was uninterrupted. Section 8. Unanswered questions. Case notes. Why was Anneliese von Ribbentrop exempted from denazification while others were prosecuted? Why did insufficient evidence halt prosecution of Rudolf when similar cases proceeded? How did multiple children disappear entirely from modern records? Why were inheritance laws prioritized over moral responsibility? These questions remain unresolved. Final assessment. Part 2. The execution at Nuremberg delivered a message to the world. No office protects against justice. But the family files tell a quieter truth. Justice stopped where inheritance began. The gallows ended a man. They did not end a legacy. Agar Chaho to next main, case file extension, after the gallows. Subject. Families who outlived the Reich. Classification. Historical review, comparative analysis. Section 9. Pattern beyond one family. Further investigation confirms that the Ribbentrop case was not an exception. Similar outcomes were documented across multiple high-ranking Nazi families. Execution removed individuals. It did not dismantle networks of inheritance, protection, and silence. Caser. Albert Speer, the polished survivor. Position. Chief architect of the Reich Armaments Minister. Sentence. 20 years imprisonment. Albert Speer walked out of Spandau prison in 1966, alive and articulate. Unlike Ribbentrop, he survived the war and controlled his narrative personally. Family outcome. Wealth preserved. Children educated abroad. No forced asset forfeiture. Speer publicly accepted moral responsibility, while carefully avoiding legal guilt. His children grew up in a Germany willing to separate talent from crime. Finding. Confession softened judgment. Inheritance remained untouched. Case B. Hermann Göring, the poisoned escape. Position. Reichsmarschall. Sentence. Death by hanging, evaded via suicide. Göring avoided the gallows, but his execution was symbolic either way. His estate was seized in parts, but personal wealth hidden through networks survived the war. Family outcome. Daughter lived under changed identity. No long-term prosecution. Financial support traced to pre-war holdings. Finding. Name changed. Consequences diluted. Case C. Joseph Mengele, the vanishing bloodline. Position. Camp doctor, Auschwitz. Sentence. Never captured. Mengele escaped justice entirely, yet the story of his family is even more revealing. Family outcome. Wealth from industrial business protected. Family members funded his decades in hiding. No criminal charges against financiers. When his death was confirmed decades later, no assets were seized retroactively. Finding. Absence from court meant absence of accountability. Section 10. The legal shield, inheritance law. Across all cases, one principle remained consistent. Crimes were individual. Wealth was familial. Courts across post-war Europe repeatedly ruled that assets acquired before Nazi crimes could not be confiscated without direct proof of criminal origin. This created a legal firewall. Bloodlines continued. Businesses survived. Social status rebuilt. Justice addressed actions, not advantages. Section 11. Children of the guilty. Children of Nazi elites followed three visible paths. Silence. Disappearing from records. Rebranding. Changing names, professions. Justification. Rewriting family history. Very few openly rejected their inheritance. Even fewer rejected the wealth that came with it. Section 12. What Nuremberg could not do. Nuremberg proved that leaders could fall. It did not prove that systems could be dismantled. The gallows punished symbols. Courts protected continuity. Money crossed regimes untouched. The world watched executions. It did not watch inheritance transfers. Final assessment, Part 3. Ribbentrop's family was not lucky. They were predictable. Post-war justice functioned like a blade, sharp at the top, blunt at the roots. The Reich ended in ruins. Its fortunes did not. Closing note, hook for next part. If justice stopped at the gallows, who exactly paid the price? Because for every man who fell, a family walked away. Agar Chaho to next main. Post-war justice focused almost exclusively on men in uniform. What it largely ignored was the other half of the system. Wives, partners, financiers, and social enablers. These women did not sign orders. They opened doors. Case 1. Anneliese von Ribbentrop, the architect behind the curtain. Already documented in earlier files, Anneliese's role now warrants reassessment. Witness accounts and historical correspondence indicate she was not a passive spouse. She curated social networks, introduced her husband to elite Nazi circles, and reinforced his political ambitions when he was still an outsider. Despite this, no trial, no denazification, no confiscation. Her wealth shielded her. Her gender softened scrutiny. Finding: influence without a uniform left no fingerprints. Case 2. Emmy Göring, the First Lady of the Reich. Spouse: Hermann Göring. Emmy Göring lived openly during the Nazi era, enjoying celebrity status, luxury, and proximity to power. She hosted events, cultivated public image, and benefited directly from confiscated property. After the war, brief detention, classified as a lesser offender, assets partially retained. She later lived comfortably, supported by remaining wealth and public sympathy. Finding: visibility did not equal accountability. Case 3. Marguerite Himmler, the Believer. Spouse: Heinrich Himmler. Private letters confirm Marguerite Himmler was ideologically aligned with her husband. She supported SS racial policies and benefited from forced labor allocations. Yet, no criminal prosecution, no long-term imprisonment, no public reckoning. She faded into obscurity, not disgrace. Finding: belief was not considered a crime. Case 4. The financiers' wives, silent beneficiaries. Multiple wives of industrialists who funded the Nazi regime retained company shares, property, international accounts. They claimed ignorance. Courts accepted it. In practice, profits survived where paper trails did not. Finding: money spoke softly. Courts listened. Section 14. Why women were rarely prosecuted. Investigators consistently cited 4 justifications. They held no official rank. They followed their husbands. They lacked decision-making authority. There is insufficient evidence, but this reasoning ignored reality. Power is not always written on paper. Sometimes it is whispered at dinner tables. Section 15. Justice by optics. Prosecuting women threatened the post-war narrative. Germany needed mothers. Families needed rebuilding. Courts needed stability. Punishing wives complicated reconciliation, so justice chose optics over depth. Final assessment, Part 4. The Reich was not run by men alone, but only men paid the full price. Women who encouraged, enabled, benefited, were reframed as bystanders. The gallows were gendered. The silence was deliberate. Series conclusion hook. If power can exist without titles, and guilt without punishment, then history did not miss these women. It looked away. Agar Chaho to next main aapke liye bana sakta hoon.